Last Thanksgiving, my sister-in-law stood up at our family dinner table and announced she was pregnant with my dad's baby. What happened next tore our family apart forever, and I'm still trying to piece together how we got here. Let me tell you about the people who were sitting around that table, because understanding who they were makes what happened next even more devastating. There's my brother Declan, 32 years old, the kind of guy who fixes everything with his hands and believes the best in everyone. He works construction, comes home covered in dust every day, and has been trying to start a family with his wife for 3 years. Declan's the type who still calls our mom every Sunday and brings her flowers on Mother's Day. He married Isla thinking he'd found his soulmate. Isla, my sister-in-law, 26 and beautiful in that effortless way that makes other women jealous. She's been part of our family for 3 years, but somehow always felt like she was performing the role of daughter-in-law rather than actually living it. She quit her job as a receptionist after the wedding to focus on being a wife, which seemed sweet at the time. Now I wonder if it was calculated. My dad, Griffin, is 55, owns a small plumbing business, and has always been the guy everyone calls when something breaks. He's got this charming, helpful personality that makes neighbors love him and customers trust him. Growing up, I thought he was the perfect father. He coached my soccer team, taught Declan how to drive, and never missed one of Nova's school plays. But charm can be a mask, and helpful hands can wander where they shouldn't. Then there's my mom, Brielle, 52 years old and the backbone of our family. She works as a school secretary, which means she deals with drama all day and has zero tolerance for nonsense at home. Mom's always been the one who sees through people's facades, who asks the uncomfortable questions everyone else avoids. She has this way of looking at you that makes you confess things you didn't even know you were hiding. I should have paid more attention to the way she'd been looking at Griffin and Isla lately. My younger sister Nova is 24, still in college part-time, and the baby of the family. She's got this infectious energy that lights up every room she enters. Nova's the one who still believes in fairy tales and happy endings, who thinks family dinner is sacred and that love conquers everything. What happened that night destroyed something innocent in her that I'm not sure she'll ever get back. And then there's me, Sienna, 28 years old, working in marketing and somehow always ending up as the family peacekeeper. I'm the one who smooths over arguments, who changes the subject when things get tense, who makes excuses for everyone else's bad behavior. I've spent my whole life thinking that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping the family together. I was wrong. I thought I knew these people. I thought I understood the dynamics of the family I'd grown up in for nearly 3 decades. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. We had traditions. We had inside jokes. We had each other's backs. Or at least that's what I believed until that Thursday evening when everything I thought I knew about my family exploded across our dining room like shattered glass. You see, families are like houses. From the outside, they can look perfect, stable, beautiful even. But sometimes the foundation is rotting from the inside and you don't realize it until the whole structure comes crashing down. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones doing the most damage, and the secrets they're keeping aren't just personal choices, but destructive forces that can level everything you've built your life on. That Thanksgiving dinner started like every other. Mom spent 3 days cooking, Dad carved the turkey while telling the same terrible jokes he tells every year, and we all gathered around the table grateful for each other and the life we'd built together. But by the time dessert was supposed to be served, half of us weren't speaking to each other. My parents' marriage was over. My brother's world was destroyed. And I realized that sometimes the people closest to you are complete strangers. This is the story of how one dinner, one confession, and one moment of brutal honesty changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be family. This is the story of the night my sister-in-law stood up and told the truth that no one wanted to hear, and how that truth revealed secrets that had been poisoning us for months. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, still trying to understand how we got to that moment and whether we'll ever be able to put the pieces back together. But I know one thing for certain. After that night, none of us were the same people we'd been when we sat down to say grace. I drove to my childhood home that Thursday morning with butterflies in my stomach, but the good kind. You know that feeling when you're about to walk into something familiar and comforting, when when you can already smell the turkey roasting and hear the sound of laughter echoing through the hallways where you grew up. I'd been looking forward to this Thanksgiving for weeks. Work had been brutal lately. My boss at the marketing firm had been piling projects on my desk like I was some kind of miracle worker. And my boyfriend Jake and I had just gone through another one of those fights where we both said things we couldn't take back. The kind of fight that makes you question whether you're with the right person or just settling because being alone feels scarier than being unhappy. I needed this break. I needed my family. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked exactly like it always did. Mom's chrysanthemums were still blooming in their perfectly arranged pots by the front door. Dad's truck was parked at that weird angle he always uses, taking up way more space than necessary. The house looked warm and inviting, with that soft golden light spilling from the windows that makes everything seem safe and right with the world. I could hear Nova's laugh before I even opened the front door. She was in the kitchen with Mom, probably sneaking tastes of the stuffing like she's done every Thanksgiving since she was 5 years old. The smell hit me immediately, that perfect combination of roasted turkey, sage, and cinnamon that I associate with home and happiness and everything good about being part of a family. Sienna! Nova practically launched herself at me, her arms wrapping around my neck in one of those hugs that reminds you why you love someone. She was wearing this ridiculous apron covered in cartoon turkeys that Mom probably bought her as a joke. I'm so glad you're here. Wait until you hear about my new boyfriend, Marcus. He's studying environmental science and he has the most amazing eyes. Mom rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. Nova's been talking about this boy nonstop for 3 days. I think she's forgotten there are other topics of conversation. She wiped her hands on her apron and gave me the kind of hug only mothers can give, the kind that makes you feel like you're 7 years old again and nothing bad can touch you. How are you holding up, honey? Mom asked, and I knew she was asking about Jake without actually mentioning his name. She's always had this ability to read my moods, to know when I'm struggling even when I'm trying to hide it. You look tired. I was about to answer when Dad walked in carrying a football and wearing his lucky Thanksgiving shirt, the one with the turkey wearing sunglasses that's so faded you can barely make out the design anymore. There's my girl. He scooped me up in a bear hug that lifted me off my feet, ready for some touch football after dinner. I've been practicing my quarterback skills. Declan appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work boots and looking like he'd just gotten off a job site. Dad, you threw your back out last year trying to show off. Maybe this year we should stick to watching the game on TV. But he was grinning as he said it, the kind of grin that told me he was happy to be here too. Where's Isla? I asked, looking around for my sister-in-law. Declan's expression shifted slightly, just a tiny change that I might not have noticed if I wasn't looking for it. She's upstairs getting ready. She's been feeling a little under the weather lately. Nothing serious, just tired all the time. Dad immediately perked up. Is she taking her vitamins? I told her she needs to eat more red meat. A woman her age needs iron. He said it with such genuine concern, such fatherly care, that it made my heart warm. This was the dad I remembered, the one who worried about everyone and wanted to fix everything. Griffin, leave the poor girl alone, Mom said, but there was something sharp in her voice that I couldn't quite place. She's fine. Some people just need more rest than others. The house felt alive with activity and anticipation. Nova was bouncing between helping Mom in the kitchen and texting on her phone. Dad was checking the turkey and making his usual jokes about how he was the real chef in the family. Declan was setting up the dining room table with Mom's good china, the set that only comes out for holidays and special occasions. Everything seemed perfect, normal, exactly like it was supposed to be. This was my family at their best, working together to create something beautiful and meaningful. This was what I'd been craving for weeks, this sense of belonging and tradition and unconditional love. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that were already forming. The way Mom's jaw tightened when Dad mentioned Isla, the way Declan kept checking his phone like he was waiting for something, the way the house felt just a little too quiet when Isla finally came downstairs, like everyone was holding their breath. I should have paid attention to those warning signs, but I was too caught up in the warmth and comfort of being home. Dinner started exactly the way it always did. Dad carved the turkey with the ceremonial carving knife that only comes out on holidays. making the same jokes about his surgical precision that we've heard 1,000 times. Mom brought out dish after dish from the kitchen, each one perfectly prepared and arranged, like something from a magazine. Nova couldn't stop talking about Marcus and how he was planning to minor in sustainable agriculture, while Declan teased her about dating a tree hugger. But Isla was different. She sat in her usual spot between Declan and Dad, but she seemed smaller somehow, like she was trying to disappear into her chair. She'd always been quiet during family gatherings, but this was something else. She was picking at her food, moving it around her plate without actually eating anything. When Mom asked if the green bean casserole was too salty, Isla just nodded and said it was fine, even though she hadn't taken a single bite. "You feeling okay, babe?" Declan asked, reaching over to touch her forehead. "You've been off all week." Isla flinched away from his hand like his touch burned her. "I'm fine, just thinking about things." "What kind of things?" The question came from Dad, and there was something in his voice that made everyone look up from their plates. It wasn't the casual concern of a father-in-law checking on his son's wife. It was sharper, more urgent. "Just the future," Isla said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What comes next?" Mom set down her fork with more force than necessary. "Well, hopefully what comes next is you eating something. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." I tried to lighten the mood. Maybe she's just nervous about Nova's boyfriend coming to Christmas dinner. I know I would be. But my joke fell flat. Nobody laughed. Nova, oblivious to the tension building around the table, launched into another story about Marcus and his plans to revolutionize composting. Dad made appropriate listening sounds, but I noticed he kept glancing at Isla. Not the way you look at someone when you're worried about them, but the way you look at someone when you're waiting for them to say something specific. Mom noticed too. I could tell by the way her mouth was getting tighter with each passing minute, the way she was gripping her wine glass like she wanted to throw it at someone. The breaking point came when Dad, trying to fill one of the increasingly uncomfortable silences, made a joke about grandchildren. "Well, maybe next year we'll have some little ones running around the table. This house could use the sound of tiny feet again." Isla's face went completely white. Declan laughed and squeezed her shoulder. "We're working on it, Dad. These things take time." "Some things take time," Dad said, his eyes fixed on Isla. "Other things happen when they're meant to happen." That's when Isla's composure finally cracked. Her hands started shaking, and she pushed her chair back from the table so abruptly that it scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound that made everyone wince. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't sit here and pretend everything is normal when it's not." Declan reached for her hand. "Isla, what are you talking about? Whatever's bothering you, we can talk about it later. This is supposed to be a nice family dinner." "No." She pulled her hand away from his. "They need to know. You need to know. I can't keep living this lie." The dining room went dead silent. Even Nova stopped talking, her fork halfway to her mouth, sensing that something serious was about to happen. "What lie?" Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. Isla looked around the table at all of us, her eyes wild with panic and determination. "I'm pregnant." For a split second, the table erupted in confused congratulations. Nova squealed with excitement. Declan started to stand up to hug his wife, and even Mom managed a surprised smile. But Isla held up her hand to stop them. "But it's not his." The words hit the table like a physical blow. Declan's fork clattered to his plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Nova's mouth fell open. Mom went rigid in her chair. "What do you mean it's not his?" Declan's voice cracked on the last word. Isla looked directly at Dad, tears streaming down her face. "Because I've been sleeping with someone else, someone who told me to keep quiet about it, to handle this on my own." Dad's face had gone from confusion to horror, but there was something else there too. Guilt, recognition, fear. "You told me to keep quiet," Isla said, her voice gaining strength as she finally spoke the truth that had been eating her alive. "You promised me we'd figure this out together, but you left me to deal with this alone while my marriage fell apart." The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The Thanksgiving dinner that had started with such warmth and tradition had just become the moment that would destroy everything we thought we knew about each other. The silence that followed Isla's confession felt like it lasted forever, but it was probably only seconds before Declan found his voice. "What are you talking about?" His words came out strangled, like someone was squeezing his throat. "We've been trying for a baby for 2 years. How is it not mine?" Isla was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "Because we haven't been intimate in months, Declan. You've been working double shifts, coming home exhausted, and I was lonely and scared, and he was there." "Who was there?" Declan's voice was getting louder, more desperate. "Who the hell are you talking about?" That's when Isla made the choice that would blow our family apart forever. She turned to look directly at Dad, her tear-stained face full of anguish and relief and terror all at once. "Your father," she whispered. Dad's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of shock or confusion, his face crumpled with guilt. Not the face of an innocent man being falsely accused, but the face of someone whose worst secret had just been exposed. "Isla, don't," he said quietly. "We talked about this. You promised you would handle this quietly." Those words hit the table like a bomb. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers, though somehow she caught it before it hit the floor. Nova made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Declan looked back and forth between his wife and his father like he was watching a tennis match played in a foreign language. Handle what quietly? Declan stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Dad opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked trapped, cornered, like an animal that had run out of places to hide. "Tell him," Isla said, her voice gaining strength. "Tell him how you started coming over when he was working late. Tell him how you said Mom didn't understand you anymore, how she was cold and distant. Tell him how you said you loved me." "You said you loved her?" Declan's voice broke completely. "My wife." "You said you loved my wife?" Mom finally spoke, and her voice was deadly calm. "How long?" The question hung in the air. Everyone knew she wasn't asking Declan. Isla wiped her nose with her napkin, leaving mascara streaks on the white fabric. 8 months. It started 8 months ago." 8 months, Mom repeated like she was testing how the words tasted. 8 months of you coming into my home, eating at my table, helping yourself to my daughter-in-law while I was at work. Dad finally found his voice. "Brielle, it wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. It just happened." "It just happened?" Mom's composure was cracking. An affair just happened? Getting my son's wife pregnant just happened? Nova had started crying, quiet tears that she was trying to hide behind her hands. I wanted to comfort her, but I was frozen in my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. This was my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike and scared away boys when I was in high school. This was my sister-in-law, who I'd helped plan a surprise party for Declan just last month. "I never meant for this to happen," Isla said, looking at Declan with desperate eyes. "I love you. I married you because I love you, but he was so kind to me, so attentive, and you were never home anymore." "So this is my fault?" Declan's voice was raw with pain. "I work 60-hour weeks to save money for the house you wanted, for the family you said you wanted, and somehow that justifies you sleeping with my father." "It's not your fault," Dad said quietly. "It's mine. All of it." "You're damn right it's your fault." Declan spun around to face his father. "How could you do this to me? To Mom? How could you destroy our family like this?" But before Dad could answer, Mom stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she was gathering strength for what came next. "I want to know everything," she said, her voice steady but dangerous. "I want to know when it started, where it happened, how many times you brought her into our bed." "Mom, don't torture yourself," I finally found my voice. "It wasn't in our bed," Dad said quickly. "Never in our bed. Brielle, I swear to you, never in our bed." "Oh, well, that makes it so much better." Mom's sarcasm was sharp enough to cut glass. "As long as you had the decency to betray our marriage somewhere else." Isla was sobbing harder now. "I wanted to tell you so many times, Declan. Every day I wanted to tell you. But he said if we just waited, if we handled it quietly, maybe we could figure out a way to make this work without destroying everyone." "Make what work?" Declan demanded. A life where you raise my father's baby and I pretend it's mine? A life where I'm married to someone who's been lying to me for 8 months? The dining room felt like a war zone. The beautiful Thanksgiving dinner sat cooling on the table, forgotten in the wreckage of our family. Everyone was either crying or shouting or sitting in stunned silence. And I realized that this was just the beginning. The explosion came from the person I least expected. Mom had been sitting there taking it all in, absorbing every horrible detail with that terrifying calm that meant she was calculating her next move. But when Dad tried to reach across the table toward Isla, probably to comfort her or maybe to shut her up, something inside Mom finally snapped. "Don't you dare touch her." Mom's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Don't you dare comfort the woman who's been screwing you behind our son's back." Dad pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. "Brielle, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you've been manipulating a girl young enough to be your daughter. Explain how you've been lying to my face for 8 months while I suspected something was wrong, but convinced myself I was being paranoid." That's when the room went completely silent. Even Isla stopped crying. "You knew?" Declan's voice was barely a whisper. Mom's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Oh, I didn't know the details, but I knew something was happening. A woman doesn't live with a man for 25 years without learning to read the signs. The way he started working late when he'd never worked late before. The way he suddenly cared about his appearance again, buying new cologne and getting his hair cut every 2 weeks. The way his phone was always face down on the table." She turned to look at Dad with pure hatred in her eyes. But mostly it was the way he looked at her, the way he found excuses to touch her shoulder or help her with her coat, the way he lit up when she walked into a room in a way he hadn't lit up for me in years. "Mom," Nova whispered, "why didn't you say anything?" "Because I hoped I was wrong." Mom's voice cracked for the first time. "Because I wanted to believe that the man I married, the father of my children, wouldn't be capable of something this cruel and selfish." Dad tried again. "Brielle, I never meant to hurt anyone. It just happened gradually. Isla was lonely, I was feeling unappreciated at home, and we connected." "Connected?" Declan slammed his fist on the table so hard the plates jumped. "You connected with my wife by getting her pregnant?" Isla finally spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. "I have to tell you everything, all of it, because the lies have to stop." She looked around the table at all of us, and I could see her making the decision to burn it all down, to tell the complete truth, no matter how much it hurt. It started when Declan was working those long shifts on the Morrison project. Griffin would come over to fix things around the house, little repairs that didn't really need fixing. He said Brielle was always criticizing him, that she didn't appreciate how hard he worked. He made me feel special, like I was the only person who really understood him. Mom made a sound like she'd been slapped. "He told me he was going to leave you," Isla continued, looking at Mom. "He said he'd been unhappy for years but stayed because of the kids. He said once Nova graduated, he was going to ask for a divorce so we could be together." "He was going to leave me for you?" Mom's voice was deadly quiet. "That's what he told me. He said we were going to wait until after the holidays to tell everyone that we'd handle it carefully so no one got hurt unnecessarily." Dad's face had gone gray. "Isla, stop. Please stop." "No," she said, gaining strength. "I'm done protecting you. I'm done lying to everyone I care about." She turned to Declan. "When I found out I was pregnant, I told him right away. I thought he'd be happy. I thought this was what we'd been working toward." "And what did he say?" Declan asked, though his voice suggested he didn't really want to know the answer. "He told me to get rid of it. He said we jumped the gun, that the timing was wrong. When I said I couldn't do that, he told me to handle it quietly. Maybe tell you it was yours and just never say anything." The room erupted. Declan started toward his father with murder in his eyes, but I grabbed his arm. Nova was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Mom stood up slowly, deliberately, like she was moving underwater. 25 years, Mom said, her voice getting stronger with each word. 25 years of marriage, and you were going to let our son raise your bastard child while you figured out how to abandon me." She picked up her wine glass, the one she'd been gripping throughout this entire nightmare, and for a moment, I thought she was going to drink from it. Instead, she hurled it across the room with all the force of 25 years of betrayal behind it. The glass exploded against the wall, red wine splashing like blood across Mom's carefully chosen wallpaper. The sound was so loud and sudden that everyone jumped. In the silence that followed, Mom looked around the table at all of us. Her family, her life, everything that had just been destroyed. "Get out," she said to Dad. "Get out of my house and don't come back." The immediate aftermath was chaos. Dad tried to argue, tried to explain, tried to somehow make this all okay, but Mom wouldn't hear another word. She stood by the dining room door, pointing toward the exit like an avenging angel, wine stains on her blouse and fury in her eyes. Nova was hyperventilating in the corner while I rubbed her back, trying to calm her down. Declan was pacing like a caged animal, his hands clenched into fists, looking like he might punch a hole through the wall. Dad packed a bag that night and moved into a motel on the other side of town. Isla left the next morning, driving back to her parents' house 3 states away, without saying goodbye to anyone except Declan. And even that conversation happened behind closed doors. I never found out what they said to each other, but when Declan came back downstairs, his eyes were red, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The divorce papers were filed within a week. Turns out Mom hadn't been sitting around doing nothing during those months when she suspected something was wrong. She'd been gathering evidence, taking photos of Dad's credit card statements that showed charges at restaurants and hotels she'd never been to. She'd been documenting his lies, his late nights, his changed behavior. She'd even hired a private investigator who had photos of Dad and Isla together at a coffee shop across town, holding hands and looking at each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. I wanted to give him one last chance, Mom told me a few weeks later as we sat in her kitchen, boxing up Dad's belongings. I thought maybe if I confronted him privately, if I gave him the opportunity to come clean and end it, we might be able to work through it. But he chose to keep lying, even when faced with direct questions. He chose to let our son potentially raise his child. That's when I knew our marriage was truly over. Declan filed for divorce, too, which broke my heart almost as much as everything else. They'd been trying for a baby for so long, and to find out that Isla was pregnant with someone else's child, especially Dad's child, was a betrayal he couldn't forgive. He sold the house they'd bought together and moved into a small apartment downtown. For months, he threw himself into work like a man possessed, taking every overtime shift available, working until he was too exhausted to think about what his life had become. Nova struggled the most with understanding what had happened. She'd always been the optimist in our family, the one who believed in true love and happily ever after. This shattered something fundamental in her worldview. She started seeing a therapist at school and changed her major from education to psychology, saying she wanted to understand how people could hurt each other so badly. She still calls me crying sometimes, asking how she's supposed to trust anyone if our own father could do something like this. The house I grew up in, the one filled with 28 years of memories, went up for sale as part of the divorce settlement. Mom couldn't afford to keep it on her secretary's salary, and she said she didn't want to anyway. Too many ghosts. Too many rooms where she'd remember Dad's lies. She bought a small condo closer to her work and started over at 52 years old. She's dating now, which feels weird to say, but she deserves happiness after everything she's been through. Dad tried to reach out to all of us multiple times. He sent letters, left voicemails, even showed up at my apartment once looking desperate and broken. He wanted to explain, wanted us to understand that he never meant for things to go this far. But understanding and forgiving are 2 very different things. I've talked to him a few times since that night, mostly brief, awkward conversations where we both pretend we're okay. The relationship we used to have, the easy father-daughter bond I treasured my whole life, is gone. Maybe someday we'll build something new, but it will never be the same. Isla had the baby 6 months later, a little girl. Declan told me that much, though I don't know how he found out. DNA tests confirmed what we all already knew. Dad pays child support but has never met his daughter. Isla moved on faster than any of us expected, remarrying within 2 years to someone from her hometown. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned something from the destruction she helped cause. The lesson I learned from all of this is that secrets are like cancer. They start small, maybe even with good intentions, but they grow and spread and poison everything they touch. Dad thought he was protecting people by keeping his affair quiet. Isla thought she was protecting her marriage by not telling the truth. But secrets don't protect anyone. They just delay the inevitable explosion and make it so much worse when it finally happens. I also learned that sometimes the people you think are victims are actually the strongest ones in the room. Mom endured months of suspicion and heartbreak, but when the truth finally came out, she was the one who took control. She was the one who had been preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. She was the one who survived with her dignity intact. Our family looks completely different now. Holiday dinners are smaller, quieter, but maybe more honest. We don't pretend everything is perfect anymore. We check in with each other more often, ask harder questions, and refuse to let things fester in silence. It's taken 3 years, but we're building something new on the ruins of what we lost. That Thanksgiving changed everything, but maybe that needed to happen. Sometimes families need to be torn apart before they can be rebuilt on a foundation of truth instead of comfortable lies. And sometimes the most painful experiences teach you the most important lessons about who you can really trust and what really matters. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below about your own experiences with family, secrets, or betrayal, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories about life, love, and the complicated relationships that shape us all.